6:19, and we have a quorum. And so I will call the meeting to order. The first item that we have on the agenda is the approval of minutes from May 3rd, 2022. And I will just ask everybody before, we have a younger Bloomington citizen that is attending here, and does anybody have any objections to having her sit at the table in the place? I thought it would be a nice addition.
I hope you don't.
Did she bring any candy?
No, but you were supposed to bring it for her, Rob. You know that's the role of Grant. Well, you're always supposed to have. I do have a mint in my pocket. My granddaughter's like those. If she'd like one.
If I know she's coming, I'll bring some power nuggets.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll pass the mints over to her.
Melissa wants a roll call.
Okay. All right. I guess we need to start the meeting with a roll call. So, Carolyn, you want to call the roll?
Harder.
Present.
Bussey.
Here.
Keller.
Here.
Hunt.
Here.
Lunds.
Here.
Peterson. Absent. And Erickson.
Here.
6 are present. Thank you.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda then is the approval of minutes for May 3rd, 2022. So I would entertain a motion for that.
Can I?
Sure.
I had a question. I called, I gotta find them. The last paragraph I thought didn't read correctly. There's a double negative in it or something. And
You find it?
if I can find the minutes.
Here's-
Yeah, it's the bottom of page 4.
Okay.
Port Authority members voting aye. On all present Port Authority board members voting aye to pursue a TIF. On. All Port Authority members voting aye. And then the last sentence is motion carried 4-2. Well, they're not all
Okay.
they're not all voting aye if it carried 4-2. Anyhow, I don't be a stickler, but it's
Yeah, no,
it's contradictory, isn't it?
it's
Is it just me?
it's a good point. It is. So with that change, I would then entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes.
Move approval.
Commissioner Butsey made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carter. Any further additions or corrections?
I'm gonna have to abstain because I didn't make it to the joint meeting thereafter.
Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried with one abstention. So the next item then we have is contract for bond counsel services. Shane, you gonna cover that or?
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. So this is the standard bond counsel services item that we have done in past years, re-upping Kennedy and Graven as the port's bond counsel. And I know Julie Eddington is on the line from Kennedy and Graven. If there are questions from her as client, as well as Melissa, the city attorney from the city's side. The city also has reaffirmed Kennedy and Graven as the bond counsel for the city.
So Port Authority questions, I see we've got an increase from 230 to 250. So some change. If not, I would entertain a motion then for the approval of Kennedy and Graven for our bond counsel.
Move for approval.
Okay, who wants to go first? Do we want to have Commissioner Luntz
Doesn't matter.
and then Commissioner?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. We can have a motion made by Commissioner Luntz, a motion seconded by Commissioner Hunt. My brain just froze up. At any rate, any additions or corrections or any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes are approved. Sorry for my little brain pause there. Okay, the next item that we have, so your daughter can observe something here that, adults occasionally just mess up too. All right. Professional services agreement for architectural services for the SIC Phase 2 ramp. It's on page 7, Shane. He's going to present it, I guess. He's up there.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. That's not the right one. What happened? There we go. Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. So tonight, for this item, I'll just do a little bit of review of the SIC project, and then we'll get into the meat of it. Really short presentation here. Again, the South Loop Plan, I won't read through that, how the SIC project fits into the South Loop Plan goals, and the South Loop Plan is going to be receiving an update here in the next 18 months, along with the goals. Quick history, the interstate site, the city acquired that through the lawsuit that happened for the acquisition of those properties for the north-south runway. MAC owned that property. The city was part of that lawsuit, was named in the lawsuit. Ultimately, the city decided to buy that land. And then the Alpha properties were purchased for the construction of Lindau Lane when it was extended so that it was that east-west spine in Bloomington. We ended up with these 4 parcels, of which the Alpha A and B are now developed with the Town Place Suites and AC by Marriott. And the Interstate and Alpha 5 parcel have been partially sold to SIC for their first phase, and then we have a development contract with them for the future phases, which I'll detail here in a second. Again, SIC is a technology company. SIC is the name of the patriarch of the company. It's a German name, doesn't translate well. Became aware of them through the Foreign Trade Zone. They were looking for exurban 20-acre sites. This is a 14-acre site, and it only works for them if you do it really densely and make the parking work on the site, which leads to structured parking costs. So the first phase, which is under construction now and almost done, they will move into that facility in August of this year. A grand opening event will be held in November when things are a little bit more established on site, and stay tuned for the date on that. The second phase is really the meat of the project. It brings their headquarters to their production and logistics facility. This is a 150,000 square foot multi-story office building. Phase 3 is more production and logistics, and phase 4 in the future is another 100 to 150,000 square foot office building. And so this first phase is the one that's being built right now. The next phase here, this is what we're talking about here tonight. These parking ramp and the phase 2 office building. Again, I'll move through the rest of the phases. Again, in red is what we're talking about tonight, and the yellow are future phases. That's how it would look all in. And again, just the schedule in graphical format. They're looking at starting phase 2 in the spring of 2023, although that's not certain as we sit here today. We do need to do this pre-planning work in order to get ready for that. SIC on the private side is also doing this pre-planning work, soils, survey work, and then architectural services for their side of the project, which is the private office building. And then how the public investment works in this project, again, we adjusted the land price so that it was more like exurban sites, and then we provide structured parking or shared parts of the structured parking, which SIC then leases during the day, and it actually functions as shared parking in the off-business hours where the public can legally park there, and it will be signed as such. Funding for that public investment is through the Carlton TIF District, which we've almost zeroed that fund out, but the intent is to continue draining that fund until it's gone. It's from the old Carlton TIF District, and we've been able to pool that money throughout the area for projects like this. The South Loop Development Fund, and then the MOA ARF. This is the unrestricted funds that we have coming off of the Mall TIF District that we consummated in the 2016 development agreement with them. I won't go through the details. I left this slide in because really, what's happening now with construction costs will front load some of our public investment for this project. And honestly, whether or not we can fulfill every single parking space that was talked about in the original development agreement is to be determined. We capped our funds as such, and now with construction costs going up as quickly as they are, typically they have been about double of regular inflation. That's true before the pandemic, and unfortunately it's true during the pandemic as well, which of course is, if regular inflation is 8 or 9 or something like that, you got construction inflation and in the high teens, and you do that over 2 years, you really start to see high costs. But just as a reminder, we do have a cap on the funds, and if the Port and Council decide to invest more later, that's up to them. We have enough money to fund these funds, but outside of that will depend on revenues that we'll see in the future. This is the agreements outline from when we did the SIC deal. But again, what we're doing now is consistent with those agreements. We're doing the work for the parking. They're doing the work for the building. As I mentioned, some other smaller contracts we'll need to execute here for soil borings and survey. And really what we're asking to do tonight is for the council, for the Port Authority to pass a motion approving this professional services agreement for architectural services. We'll be using the same architect that SIC is using on the private side, and we've cross-referenced those costs to make sure they're industry standards and like what SIC is paying on the private side for that. And we can do this because the Port Authority has special powers in the statute. It's one of our quote-unquote superpowers that we can go and directly contract with an entity like this when it makes sense to do so, especially for things like parking, specifically in the statute for that. So that's what we're asking the Port to consider tonight. Be happy to answer any questions.
Port Authority questions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Massey?
So you said the same architect as the private side. So the architect that did the current building is going to do this phase as well, right? So we have the continuity and look and feel and the whole bit. And I'm assuming that's going to be the plan as we continue through this process and as we get to all 4 steps, all 4 phases.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners, and Commissioner Bussey. So yes, so Klauberg is the architect that we'd be contracting with. They did the first phase. SIC is working with them on this second phase, and we would be working with them for the parking ramp. So it's all economies of scale. It's all one plan sheet, if you will, that's planning it all together. Now, whether or not, on the next phase that we will all collectively decide to use Klauberg is something that, largely SIC, will be in control of, because the meat of the architectural work and engineering will be done on the private side. A relatively smaller piece of it is on the public side. And so assuming that all goes well in this phase, it's been going well in the last phase. I have no reason to believe that that won't happen, but it's not set in stone that SIC will or that we will.
Okay. The economy of scale obviously is the important part, but I also am concerned. Just want to make sure that it looks good too.
Commissioner Luntz?
Yeah, who selected Klauberg? Was it the city or SIC?
Mr. President, Commissioners, Commissioner Lenz. So SIC selected Klauberg. They are using them for the private building.
Okay.
And again, the economies of scale and things like
And
that.
have they done parking ramps before? And do you know of any, if they have, do you know of any examples of them?
Commissioner Lenz, they are a collection, a relatively new firm. They are derivative, very experienced people, but they split off. I'm going to forget the firm that they split off from. But they're very experienced people. So I know that they've done projects like this, but I don't have specific examples sitting here today for a project that these particular staff have done. We'd be happy to get you some references if you'd like.
It's hard to make a parking ramp, and I'm reticent to use the word good, but acceptable. And I mean, there are a few exceptions around that are pretty good. And I'll tell you, Normandale's ramp on College View Drive is one of the better ones around in the entire Twin Cities. So I was.
Mr. Commissioner Lenz, I don't disagree with anything you just said, and I actually like that ramp, even though it's relatively simple. It still looks good. We will be challenged by costs as we move through this process because just everything is expensive right now.
Commissioner Hunt?
It's just nice to drive. It's nice to drive by there and see how quickly it's gone up, and it looks, I mean, what a nice change it is to that block and the street, so. Been fun to watch.
Absolutely.
So Shane, they're going to they'll be moving employees into the facility then later this summer? Is that the plan?
Mr. President, Commissioners, yes, they will be moving the employees from the Savage location into the Bloomington location in August. And on the foreign trade zone side of things, that subzone will be moving to the Bloomington location from the Savage location.
And then are they going to stay with roughly the same number of employees, or there'll be some increase to the employment then when they come in, or?
They will be increasing employees as they move through this at a pace and as outlined in the various deed grants that they got. So they're required to do that or pay that money back. So I don't have those numbers in front of me right now.
Well, but my recollection is, I mean, they're very well-paid employees. It was $60,000-$70,000 a year. I mean, these are, I mean, this whole thing, I think, has just been a wonderful example of working cooperatively and using the things that we have. So it's really a great program.
Mr. President, I think the average and mean wage is even higher than that. If I recall, it's in the 80s. And so they're very well, really good paying jobs, especially when the headquarters moves in. There's a lot of engineers and research type people that work there. In addition to some lower wage jobs, which aren't lower wage anymore, but weren't even before the pandemic. But their average and mean wage is quite high.
Well, and it's great that they want to move forward with the second phase. I mean, again, they're not committing at this point, but that's really a good signal. So, well, any further discussion? Otherwise, we need to have we've got a motion up on the screen. I'd entertain that motion. Commissioner Hunt?
I move for approval.
Have a second? Second by Commissioner Luntz. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried 6-0. And Commissioner Luntz, I will second your concern about parking ramps. Back when I was at the University of Minnesota, I looked at these ramps and I said, do they have to be this ugly? And we really worked, and that was also one of the big discussions when we went with Metro Transit or whatever and did the ramp out here to try it and build it with some retail space, something else. So at any rate.
Convention Center's got a pretty good one.
Yeah.
President Udall was at the U. I heard him talk one time when he first got here, and he said, whoever built a parking ramp with one of the greatest views of the Mississippi River you could ever want.
Well, I had nothing to do with that one.
They charge more for that view when you.
But it was quite a
All right.
piece of land.
All right.
I could tell you stories about that, Rob. A lot of stories.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we are then on to the final item of the agenda, and I see we have our presenter already up there. And I think we have another presenter in the back of the room here, so.
I apologize, we don't have the presentation up here. But
Well,
it should be in with all the packets.
I think we can survive. We'll.
So it's my pleasure that I'm going to introduce Jim Eichten, who is the audit, the managing partner for the audit firm MMKR, who has been doing the audit for the city and the port for 5 years now.
Okay.
So with that, I'll turn it over to him. Thank you.
Just add, you have paper copies of the presentation, so maybe you have reference that.
No, I don't have it with me. I'm sorry, I believe it's in your packets.
Yeah, it was in the packet.
I just don't have a copy of it.
It.
I can talk off the hop.
What's that?
There's a paper copy
It's-
there. She was using it for drawing paper. You can probably
In the information
grab it.
you have.
This second place in, there should be a.
There we go. There you go. I can go off that. There you go. Perfect. Very good. Thank you. We can make it work. Thank you. Thank you. We can make still your color. We're good. Members of the Port Authority Board, my name is Jim Eichten. I'm with MMKR CPAs. I'm here this evening to give a brief presentation on the audit results for the Port Authority for the city of Bloomington. I understand we have some time limitation. You have a 6 o'clock
Right,
event, so
correct.
I think I have plenty of time. I'm not going to be too wordy up here. But in my my presentation this evening is to go over the audit report for the year ended December 31st, 2021. So it is a requirement in state statute that the city of Bloomington as well as the Port Authority complete an annual financial statement. That particular annual financial statement has been audited by us. It hasn't been completely distributed yet or finalized. That's all in the process right now. But the audit results have been completed for this year. It's important to understand that the Port Authority in accounting, in financial reporting, is considered what's called a component unit of the city, and that there is a definition in governmental accounting standards that defines what a component unit is, and the Port Authority meets that definition. So as a result, your financial activities are reported as part of the city's financial report. So as part of that particular process, we are required to complete an audit of that financial statement. Those audit standards are guided by the Office of the State Auditor in the state of Minnesota, as well as the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, which is a national organization. So the audit process really includes us providing an opinion on your financial statements that is reported in accordance with governmental accounting standards. We also provide opinions on the testing of that financial report in terms of its internal controls, specifically around the financial report. We also provide opinions on the compliance with a variety of laws and regulations that pertain to that financial report. Mostly those standards relate to grants and any sort of funding you might have gotten from grants or other types of revenues. Probably in your case, tax increment revenue is probably the most noteworthy item that you're receiving. And then lastly, we audit your compliance with Minnesota laws and regulations. And that particular audit is guided by the Office of the State Auditor. They provide us with a list of the laws that we test. We don't test every law that applies to the Port Authority, but just the ones that are provided on the State Auditor's list. So this year, the audit results, as noted in the PowerPoint, we did issue what's called an unmodified opinion, a complete clean opinion on that financial report. I should say we will be issuing a complete opinion. It was the opinion you were looking for, and certainly the results you were looking for as part of this audit. We did not have any findings to report in internal controls. Probably the most noteworthy kind of event when it comes to internal controls that the city relates to really every audit that we've been going through the last few years, and that relates to changes in internal controls in and around the COVID experience. Every organization had to change what they were doing on a day-to-day basis when it comes to accounting and financial reporting, solely based on the fact that people weren't necessarily working the same. You know what I mean? They were working out of the office. They might not have been here or there. So controls were changed in a number of ways. And so, we audited for that. We didn't have any concerns or challenges, but it is something that we did note and had to work through. Then lastly, on the findings page, we did issue one finding this year, and that related to our audit of the Minnesota legal compliance. So it is a requirement in state law that the city and the Port Authority pay its obligations, its payments or its invoices within 35 days of the receipt of the invoice or the receipt of the services, whatever came later. And so we do a sample of transactions of testing as part of this audit, and two of the transactions that we noted were not paid within that 35 time period. So as a result, we issued a finding related to that. Any sort of finding comes with a corrective action plan. And so our first step when it comes to any finding is ask questions. Well, why did this happen? Why is this occurring? And so the immediate reaction of the finance staff at the city was, well, we almost expected this to happen because we noted it ourselves already internally. Throughout the year, there were some challenges in the accounts payable department, the personnel, in that they noted that things weren't working or moving as quickly as they would have liked in that department. So the fact that we found these items wasn't much of a surprise to the staff. And in fact, they said, well, the corrective action plan has already been implemented and put in place because we've corrected those items already by the time we came here as city staff or as auditors. So it's important, first of all, to know that there is a corrective action plan, and second of all, it's already been implemented as we stand here today, which is really important of any finding you have of this nature.
So in your opinion, what you found is this was just a staff issue at the time?
Yeah, I think it was a personnel issue. I don't want to get into personnel issues. There is an accounts payable individual that wasn't functioning to the to the best of her ability in this case, and wasn't keeping up with the pace of the invoices, and thus when payments were being made late or after they should have, or after the
Well,
35-day time.
This is a good example of exactly why you have the audits done, and I know it's very easy to, you kind of glaze over looking at the reports and things and that, but it's part of our fiduciary responsibility, obviously, to make sure this is done. I'm kind of smiling because in the private business world, you try to have your accounts payable stretch as long as you can. And so it's a little different thing, but it's interesting that we have a statute in the state of Minnesota. So the word, if you're a treasurer of a company, you say, "May the float be with you," which is Cynthia doesn't like that. All right.
Can I ask also, you said the payment was late. Was it a day late, 30 days late?
It was not terribly late. I'd have to look back at our files to know.
So nothing alarming, just
Nothing-
later than it should have been.
Later than it should have been. In many cases, I mean, in some cases too, when we investigate, or maybe the city investigated it, there were situations with these invoices that might have been out of their control as well. Invoices were coming in late from vendors during that time frame, just because COVID was happening. And the reality of the situation is, if you document why it came in late, then it really isn't a finding. You can say, "Oh, I didn't receive this till later," or there was a dispute. You have a lot of construction contracts or contractors that, well, I'm not paying them until they finish the job. But if you document all that, we don't consider that a finding. But the documentation in these two cases wasn't available. So, yeah. Looks like you have me up. How about that? Yeah, I think that's about right. So that was the finding that we had. So then that's the first part of any audit, and certainly there was success there, in my opinion, having the one finding, which to me was considered minor. And so the second part of the audit really is financial results, and I'm not going to get into a tremendous amount of financial results here, but it is important in my PowerPoint to show that some of the financial results, which I think are, yeah. So the Port Authority's fund balance, which is really the year-end financial position, did increase $11 million. So there's, from an audit standpoint, we're really here to provide an opinion that the numbers are correct. We're not here to provide any sort of advice as to it's right, wrong, or otherwise as to the financial position. Mostly it relates to, the data is correct. So you can see that the fund balance is there. And most of them, in this particular case, are broken out into dollars that are set aside for future debt service, which is required in the governmental accounting standards, and then those available for future capital projects. So, so that was pretty much the end of my presentation. If you look at the information that we have in our, will be distributed after the fact, you'll also find there is more information on legislative data and other accounting and auditing updates. The Government Accounting Standards Board has been very busy and has been issuing a lot of standards this past 4 or 5 years. So there's a lot of standard changes, and your accounting department here is doing an excellent job of keeping up with those standards. But there is a lot to them going forward. So in summary, I was able to issue a clean opinion on the Port Authority's financial statements. We had the one finding that we reported. Probably a highlight of this year is the city, as well as the Port Authority's financial statement, will be achieving a Certificate of Achievement and Excellence in Financial Reporting, and it's the 100th year of such a certificate.
Wow.
And I believe there's going to be a celebration maybe next week, I think, at the city council meeting. Sorry, 50. See, I'm now exaggerating. I knew it was somewhere.
You were rounding up.
Yeah, 50, doubling. That's 50 years. It's 50 years. I believe it's one of the first cities in the whole entire country to receive this certificate.
Wow.
So,
That's great.
yeah, so that I think there's going to be some acknowledgement at the city council meeting next week regarding that. But so lastly, there's an increased fund balance I mentioned, and then certainly we look as an auditors for the importance of continuing ongoing assessments of controls. And the team here at the city does an exceptional job of monitoring controls and validating in improving on an each and every day basis when it comes to not only the day-to-day work that they do, but our recommendations. We come in and ask a lot of questions and provide a lot of verbal recommendations as part of the way, and they take them very seriously, which we like as auditors. So with that, I'll turn it over to you for any questions that you might have for me.
So thank you very much. Are there Board Authority Commissioner questions? If there are none, then I think what we need to do is we accept, is that the
That's correct.
right terminology? We accept the financial report, so I would entertain a motion to accept the financial report. Commissioner Hunt.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Hunt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carter. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signal by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, you know, since he talked about the 50 years that this city of Bloomington has had is going to be receiving an excellent award, maybe we should, I guess I would entertain a motion that as Port Authority that we commend the city for its financial management and the recognition that they're receiving with the 50-year award. And so, is somebody willing to make that motion?
I'll go on a roll and make that motion.
Wow,
It's
Commissioner Hunt.
well deserved.
And I got your name. We also got your sign this time, which is, so you're not signless. Do we have a second?
Keep it going over there.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Luntz. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signal by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. And please give our congratulations back to the financial department, Lori and others. Okay, all right, well, at any rate, when they get back, you can tell them. Okay. Shane, do we have anything else? So I guess we can adjourn and come back in 11 minutes.